Hey, all you Arizona lovers. This is the Finding Arizona podcast. I'm your host, Jose.
And I'm your producer, Brittany.
And here at Finding Arizona podcast, we collect the local stories of all entrepreneurs and from around the valley. So join us at findingarizonapodcast.com, where you can hear every episode and see it as well at
YouTube. Like, subscribe, and comment below who you want to see next on our show. And when you're ready to start your podcast, you found the right spot. Found House, your next podcast production company.
Now, let's get back to the show. Score big with SeatGeek. Whether it's concerts, sports, or live events, SeatGeek has you covered. Use code FindingArizona to get a fantastic $20 discount on your SeatGeek tickets. Catch your favorite live events hassle-free with extra savings. Visit SeatGeek.com and make every experience unforgettable. Welcome back, everybody, to the Finding Arizona podcast. I'm your host, Jose. Thank you so much for following us and paying attention to us. As always, we bring in very special guests every week, and today is no different. I would love to introduce both Jesse and Philip, and in more honesty, I have an introduction for Philip here. Philip is the founder of the OSR Initiative and the Utah OSR Land Cooperative, currently the CEO of OSR Green LLC and the Arizona OSR Land Cooperative known as Coslor Cove, and it is one of the second off-grid agricultural land co-op. In addition, Philip here is a board member of the Academy of Self-Reliant. Welcome, both Jesse and Philip.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jose.
No problem. I am going to start this off as someone who is curious and has curiosity about being self-reliant, and just someone who is maybe interested in wanting to join you in your communities in one of either or in Utah or here in Arizona. So I'm just going to start off by saying kudos to grabbing about 1,300 acres of off-grid community in Arizona. I can't imagine that was at all easy in the process of doing so. So if either one of you can kind of explain how one might get this amount of acreage or how this kind of process works, I would love to understand just that pivotal point, and then we'll go into a little bit of the history, which probably Philip could give us a little bit more insight on OSR's end.
Well, one of the things you have to start with is what is wanted and why.
Okay.
And so our research has shown that if you want a sustainable community, especially created under a cooperative approach,
okay,
that you need something that has over 200 members. And then you need enough land so that you can not only have the homesteads, but you can have the roads, the right-of-ways, additional general agricultural and commercial activities that would take place. And so there are several of these that are successful around the world. Mm-hmm. You have Granja Porcone in Peru, okay, and then you have several places in Italy and Spain. And so we wanted to start something that was going to last generationally, mm-hmm, because we saw a need. And we also saw success in the past historically. In fact, this is where I ought to turn it over to Jesse a little bit to share a little bit what took place in back in the 1800s in Brigham City, Utah.
Yeah, I was doing some research and ran across an account of what I consider to be an economic miracle that happened in Utah during the 1860s and 1870s. Excuse me, I'm recovering from bronchitis.
Totally fine.
Let's see, where was I? So they were having a challenge. The pioneers who moved west and settled Utah were having a challenge with the merchants from New York City who would bring wagon loads of goods to the territory and then mark up the prices 300, 400, 500%.
Yeah.
And it was draining all the capital from the area. And so a fellow by the name of Lorenzo Snow was challenged to create a self-sustaining community that could produce most of its own consumer goods.
Interesting.
This Lorenzo Snow took him a while to figure out how to get started, but what he did was he created a cooperative store.
Mm-hmm.
And for people who aren't familiar with cooperatives, the concept of a cooperative is that the people who work there or the people who purchase things there own it.
Yeah.
So that the profits stay local instead of being shipped to nameless shareholders back east or wherever.
Mm-hmm.
So he set up this store, went around town, and invited anybody who produced anything to sell their goods through the co-op store.
Nice.
And also invited every family to purchase one share in the co-op so that the profits would be distributed more equally through town. In their 10th year, they had their best year ever during a worldwide recession.
Wow.
Of 1873. They had 0% unemployment that year. And they were building homes for the widows and orphans. And I thought, while I'm reading about this, I have neighbors who are losing their homes due to unemployment.
Mm.
And, we couldn't do anything to help them. And so I'm reading about this thinking, wow, we should be building towns like this today.
Yeah.
Well, I was talking to my doctor about it. And he said, well, you should talk to Philip Gleason with Operation Self-Reliance. And so I call up Philip and I said, I hear you're building cooperative communities. And he said, yeah, come watch my presentation. So I took my wife and my sister and we went and watched it. And I thought, well, he's going to end up in the same place I want to. So I'm in. So we were the 16th shareholders in the first cooperative community in Utah.
That's wonderful. I love the story of and the interconnection that the two of you share. I think I would love to understand, Philip, what you did before or where your history, because from what I read from an interview, this all stemmed from an encounter with, I assume, a snowstorm where you didn't have any electricity and your pipes were frozen and you had a difficult time, feeding and warming your family.
Yeah, that experience, though didn't last very long, rewired my brain. What actually took place, I was a young father. We had 3 baby girls, 3 and under.
Yeah.
And we were following construction. I was an electrical superintendent on a project at Mountain Home, Idaho.
Okay.
And it was a project supposed to only last about 6 months, ended up lasting 18 months.
Wow.
And so we ended up being there through the winter and the holidays. Well, as the holidays approached, we decided to go to Grandma and Grandpa's down in Preston, Idaho, and we didn't worry about things. We were only going to be gone a week, and our propane had been lasting 2 weeks. So we thought, no big deal. So we headed down south to Preston, which is about 3-4 hours away. And, as a young married couple, we spent all of our money on Christmas. We kept enough so we could get back home.
Yeah.
Well, it was a Sunday night when we returned. We got back at midnight. And back then in Mountain Home, Idaho, a Saturday night, all the sidewalks rolled up.
Mm-hmm.
So there wasn't anything that was open, no gas stations or anything.
Yeah.
So we didn't worry about that because we were picking up a check the next morning and going on with life. We'd had a great week. But when we got to the trailer, we realized that the weather had turned bitter cold. So it was almost like 0 degrees outside. And when we opened up the RV, the trailer, which was a 29-foot Fireball back then, or give you a little bit of nostalgia.
Yeah.
But it was almost 0 degrees inside the trailer.
Oh, wow.
And consequently, there was no water. There was no heat. And this was before wet wipes. So having 3 babies, 3 and under, it was challenging.
Yeah.
But we did have an electric blanket. We had electricity. So we pulled out the hide of bed and we put the 3 babies between Mom and I and piled the blanket on and put our other bedding and put the coats on top of us. And the The blanket was on high. And so we were okay.
Okay.
We'd stabilized everything. Well, about 3 a.m. in the morning, the power to the whole trailer court went out.
Oh boy.
And, it was pretty intense because it only took a half hour for that cold to get to our babies.
Hmm.
And they started crying, and there wasn't anything we could do.
Hmm. Yeah.
Now, like I say, it didn't last very long. It only lasted about 3 hours.
Okay.
But that was sufficient to rewire my brain.
Of
And
course.
so the next day, I had two other heat sources in that RV. And since then, I've learned so much more.
Yeah.
And it comes down to knowledge. Okay.
Hmm.
So, or intelligence. And so I didn't have the knowledge, I didn't have the skill, and I didn't have the wisdom at the time. But since then, I've found out that with knowledge and skill and the wisdom, you have over 20 heat and light sources found in your kitchen, your
Yeah.
bathroom, and your garage.
Yeah.
So there was a ton of things I could have done, but I just didn't have that. So that's kind of where OSR was born,
Hmm.
because what we want to do is help families transition from a city lifestyle of dependencies to a country culture of self-reliance with like-minded neighbors while remaining debt-free. Now that's the biggest trick right there.
Yeah. The last part. Yeah.
Yeah, and so we do this in a four-step process. The first thing we do is our company, which is OSR Green. We go out and find and identify like-minded individuals and essential resources, and then we network them.
Okay.
And then the next thing, through other partners, such as the Academy and stuff working with Jesse and his business, we are able to provide a knowledge base. We currently have, through the Academy, I think there's over 80 webinars.
Hmm.
We're going to refactor those and get them all current because we've just gone through this. By the way, Jesse and I both have off-grid homesteads.
Nice.
So we're not just talking about it, we're actually doing it.
Living it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but helping people understand, okay, what is step one? What is step two? What is step
Sure.
three? And in the whole process of creating a community of like-minded individuals, how you organize a community to manage yourself, because we're not interested in being the top dogs at the top of the pole. We're interested in our own two-plus acre homesteads.
Yeah.
So operating that, but we want to be with like-minded people. So that's the third element, is helping people organize into cooperatives,
Hmm.
and then teaching them how to manage themselves. Because quite frankly, when you find people who want to be self-reliant, they're very opinionated, they're very determined,
Yeah.
and finding the means and the structure to help them manage themselves with their neighbors so that conflict resolution is available.
Yeah. So there's not another Hatfields and McCoy situation.
There you go. There you go.
So Jesse, I would love to understand, because you are coming in as one of the investor side, and I was interested in this aspect of it. What about Philip and what he was bringing to the table, or kind of, teaching and, divulging to others about what he's trying to build here? What made you first say, I think I can do this, or I think I want to be a part of this? And then second, what was that conversation like with your significant other? As someone who makes a lot of decisions with my wife, I can't imagine her being on board right away with the, like, we're going to live off the grid together. And like, how does this all work? Like, I have questions and curiosity. She takes it to another level where her mind goes.
Sure. Well, I grew up as a latchkey kid, if you're familiar with that term.
Yes.
We basically, my siblings and I basically raised ourselves.
Okay.
And so I'm used to doing, I'm very self-sufficient, self-reliant, do whatever I want to do when I want to do it. I
Mhm.
married a gal that's from a very traditional family. Um, where that wasn't the case.
Yep.
So yeah, there's some interesting dynamics going on there. Um, so my whole adult life, I've been looking for better ways of organizing society,
Hmm.
our social institutions, from schools to governments to um, businesses. And so when I first, as I mentioned earlier, studying Brigham City, Utah's history,
Yeah.
when I saw that and what they accomplished, I wanted to recreate it. So
Okay.
I had built a website, got a Facebook group going, and was making some slow progress finding people who thought this was a good idea.
Hmm.
My plan was to do it online first. So
Okay.
build a co-op store and invite people to sell their goods through that online store. And Philip came along, and it was clear that his project was a lot further along than mine was. So it was natural for me to jump on. My wife was there watching his presentation with me,
Hmm.
and she since said, I knew you were going to do it.
She saw it in the eyes.
Yeah, she's obviously lived with me for, gosh, how long we've been married? 40 years
Yeah.
or 35 at the time, I guess. And, is that right? Yeah. And, so she knew I was going to jump on it. And, she tries to be supportive of my crazy ideas. So,
It's a really sweet offer for her to be like, yeah, yeah, I kind of saw it coming.
well, both of our wives were a little hesitant
Of course.
until they got out to the property at Riverbed Ranch in
Hmm.
Utah and saw how peaceful it was out there. They saw the caliber of people that we have been attracting to our project, making friends out there, and it was
Hmm.
like, okay, I can do this. So they're on board now.
Well, I love hearing about these because there's always the other side of the coin where it's like you're on board fully and you understand and respect it and really want to push the envelope when it comes to this. But there's always going to be someone on the other side of that conversation of like, wait a minute, like, what's all this? And I understand that and can appreciate and empathize from the wife's perspective of like, I love my husband, I think, and I want to support him. He's got crazy ideas of like all the, and so I really enjoy hearing these stories just because it really shows and kind of demonstrates that even if you are hesitant or are questioning a lot of things, it doesn't mean that you can't be educated and encouraged to take the leap because in particular I was a child, so I'll kind of, most of the audience knows that I grew up on a reservation, and to me my tribe really was kind of this unusual aspect of where they lived and the landscape that they thrive on. And for me, it took so long to understand how all of this was working so that they had been there for so many generations, years, and thrived in a point of desolate landscape. And it really did encourage me to, when I graduated high school and now I have my degree in landscape architecture because of that fascination of like I wanted to truly understand what it meant to have this kind of thriving culture in a place where most people would probably be out of there in a day, like would try their best to just not even attempt to live somewhat of a society like this. And what you guys bring and educate reminds me a lot of my culture and my tribe, where
Mhm.
their ideals or their perspectives is the next generation, or having to work together so that they can have a thriving future for the next ones that are coming, of the children, the grandchildren. And so it is very interesting to me to have others who have that perspective, or really try their best to encourage a community to grow from that ideology or belief. And it's really beautiful to me. So the fact that, Philip, you found examples of like that in Italy and in Spain, really, it boggles my mind, because I didn't know of other cultures outside of the United States and the indigenous cultures that were here that were doing these types of things, and we're making it come true and come to life. It's really quite interesting and fascinating to me.
Well, Jose, as you're speaking about the cultures, you know, you only know what you know,
Yeah.
and so you build on that. And so, in creating this first community up here, we realized that there was some unbalance in a couple areas.
Hmm.
And so, in the Arizona one, and we're currently getting some traction going on an Idaho one.
Yeah.
But we took, well, I have a friend. His name is Dwayne Moss, and he is a very much a proponent of the Native Americans. He's an attorney, so he helps them defend their property and their water rights.
Yeah.
So he works very close with them. And so as we started seeing, okay, what can we do to improve our self-management template?
Hmm.
And we realized that we didn't have the female part of it in there. And
Okay.
that in talking with Dwayne, he said, we've got several tribes out here where the female presence is critical
Yeah.
in making final decisions.
Hmm.
And so as we took and learned through this process down here in Arizona, so we have the board of directors. Now,
Okay.
that's not limited to just males, but females can actually get on that. But that's a business element of it.
Hmm.
But what we realized is that there wasn't a deep, broad structure in place to include everybody, because in a co-op, it's not based on investment, it's based on membership. So you have one share, one vote.
Yeah.
And so it's the membership that has the power over the board. Whereas if you go into a conventional corporations and stuff like that, then it's based on your size of investment.
Yes.
Will depend on how much influence you exert over the board, or the number of shares that you own.
Yeah.
And so what we've created is a community council. And
Okay.
the community council is made up of districts made up of 5 to 10 families.
Hmm.
And each 5 to 10 families, so when you hit 11, that district will split.
Okay.
But each district is represented by an elected male and female representative. And so, and I also want to share, we have families here in Utah where it's driven by the wife.
Yeah.
In other words, the husband came out of respect for what the wife wanted. So it's
Yeah.
not always the male that drags the wife out here. We got several males out here that are going, man, she's just working my tail off. But I just wanted to let you know just how important
Mhm.
the yin, the yang, the male, the female is in having a community of like-minded people. And so those are some of the things that we've learned and implementing over that. And we appreciate the historical approach that the Native Americans bring to that, because I was unaware of that.
You bring up the female perspective, and I go back to, again, my culture, where it's a matriarchal system where your clan, or your clan is given through your mother's side. And
Right.
so, like, that perspective again, where you're dividing those districts. Same thing with the Navajos. They have different areas where the group comes together and has their kind of, I forget what they call it. It's like a little hub home where they come together and they have their meetings on and making their votes heard and kind of having those kind of routine meetings through those different districts because the Navajo Nation spans four states, and so they have to have these kind of sub districts to help them stay on the same page with one another and what the insights of those different regions will and the effects that their decisions make for one another. It really is a complex system that works well within the fact that they're doing these sub areas and wanting to work together in those kind of meeting places and then moving forward because they're making the decisions based on the group and then moving forward on that. So again, I look at your system, I look at what you guys are trying to do and trying to help and try to push forward, and I find it very very it's beautiful. And the fact that I hope that you guys continue to educate yourselves because you seem like scholarly guys and interested in those kind of dynamics. I hope that you continue forward to look into indigenous cultures or look into other cultures like you were looking in Spain and Italy, and continue to understand what makes them special or what makes them thrive, so that you can continue forward with your own community. One of the things that we kind of brought up, and it had to do with the decision on choice of land, of like what makes it so special. Can you give me some insight on, particularly, your first project in Utah, what made choosing that land so vital? And the same thing with the Arizona site. You are in a very interesting zone as far as water, region, what you guys have already on the land, which was, previously done by another family. Give us some insight on the choice of area for both not only Utah, but for Arizona as well.
Absolutely. We brought up the question earlier, what is wanted? Mm-hmm. And so what we're looking at is homesteads. Mm-hmm. And what would a homestead? And our research shows that if you have 2 acres and you're involved in square foot gardening, you have almost
83,000.
You have almost 90,000 square feet. And so with 90,000 square feet, how many people can you actually feed off of that?
Sure.
Well, if you research that and go into the USDA and some of the other universities, you can find that with the building blocks, and I'll talk about those in a sec, mm-hmm. you can actually take 120 square feet of growing bed mm-hmm. and create enough caloric and nutrient needs to keep an adult with healthy organ operation. 120 square feet. So nice. That's one of the things that we bring to the table, is to help people understand it's not what you have, it's what you do with what you've got.
Yeah.
So I have a 1,600 square foot greenhouse, which is just a temporary garden cover, if you want to look at the code for that, because it's not made out of concrete or glass and steel.
Yeah.
But it's a hoop house.
Yeah.
But I am actually having there 620 square feet in addition to a germination area, my food processing area.
Nice.
And all of my walkways and everything. So I have 620 square feet. So literally in that 1,600 square feet, which is 20 by 80,
okay,
I can grow enough food in that to feed 6 adults and keep them healthy.
Nice.
Now, that's not my experience. My experience is just going and doing what other people have learned how to do that. So we look for this additional information. And now, to give you a little more background on me, I'm the oldest of 18 children. Okay, 14 by my mom, and she passed away. Dad remarried and had 4 more kids on that. An amazing family. And my sweetheart and I, we have 7 adult children. we have 30 grandchildren, half of which are already adults and marrying, and now we have some great grandchildren. And so one of the things that I want, in other words, what is wanted? You always come back to that question. What is it you really want?
Mhm.
Because we don't try to sell people on this. We say, this is what we're doing. You find out what you're supposed to do.
Mhm.
And if it's something that you are drawn to, let's continue the conversation.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of expectations. So anyway, having been around through ups and downs of the economy, I determined that food is going to be an issue.
Mhm.
And as I studied historically, the Romans, the others, the people that controlled their food at the end of the day were the ones that came out on top.
Yeah.
And we currently have a lot of professionals and other people saying this, so we're getting ready to move into a famine type approach.
Mhm.
And there's two concerns right there. One is the quality of food, and then the other one is the quantity of food going to be available.
Mhm.
And so I determined that I needed to take my 2 acres and put in the infrastructure. Now, I can't provide all of the labor for that, but I can put in the infrastructure so that I can feed 40 to 50 people off of 2 acres.
Nice.
And that's based on intelligence, the ability to acquire knowledge, the skill to use it, and the wisdom to know when.
Yeah.
And so that's an important unit here in our OSR communities, is the 2-acre homestead that basically is the building block for the whole community. And the reason I say the building block, because it takes 6 elements to be sustainable. Okay, you got to have dirt or earth. You got to have water.
Yep.
You got to have food. You got to have shelter. You got to have some power, and you absolutely have to have good sanitation.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've created a model based on, okay, if you're going to become a member of one of our communities, you have to agree to build a passive solar home.
Mm-hmm.
That's a minimum of 600 square feet. We recommend a minimum of 800 square feet, because if you run out of fuel, we don't want your house turning into a freezer.
Yeah.
And I already explained, the experience that I had with that. The next thing is you need to have a barn or someplace you can put tools and things like that. It can be a garage, it can be a small shed, but it needs to meet the wind and snow loads.
Yeah.
So it doesn't fall apart on you and hurt somebody. And then you got to have a greenhouse. And so we put in the contract, you have to build a greenhouse, and it can be a hoop house as long as it can meet wind and snow loads. Mm-hmm. But it has to be a minimum of 600 square feet, and we recommend a minimum of 1,200 square feet.
Yeah.
And so if you start doing the math, 120 square feet per adult, plus the pathways and all the other things associated with, if you'll do the math. Now, what we also bring to the table on the education end of it is what vegetables, because you need to have complete nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can get 1 or 2 vegetables that you're really good at growing, or 3 of them on that, but that doesn't give you the bandwidth you needed for total health.
Yeah.
And so the USDA and universities have actually done all of this research, and so that's available.
Yeah.
And that's what we put in our classes that we do on this, so that you can actually, we can actually give you a layout and say, okay, you need so many square feet of corn, you need so many square feet of squash, you need so many square feet of particular type of potatoes, tomatoes, all of the things. And for example, the highest nutrient-dense food out there, from what we've found on multiple research, is kale.
Yeah.
And I'm not a real fan of kale, but I've had to start experimenting with it. Actually, my sweetheart did. We found out that you can take kale, chop it up, and put it in an omelet, and it almost tastes like bacon. So, and I can live with bacon.
Yep.
So it's the knowledge issue you bring to the whole thing. And then, so we not only give you information and tell you where you can go for passive solar homes, for barns, for the greenhouses, the types of greenhouses. We have people that have spent $100,000 on big commercial greenhouses that are 4-season. They're amazing.
Yeah.
Here in Utah, they're growing bananas. They're growing pineapple. They've got their lemons and their limes and avocados.
Nice.
Now, but I can build a lot of greenhouse for $100,000 where they're dealing with like 1,200 to 1,500 square feet. I can literally have 10,000 square feet. And so I can produce more food. It may not be as diverse because of the climate, but I also have plans for doing some of that. And so, so creating what is wanted is how do you get it sustainable? So we also require everybody to put in their own well.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is what if we run into a period of time where we can't get well drillers, we can't get parts, we can say maybe that lasts 4 or 5 years. So if you have enough redundancy built in and you have a community of like-minded people, you can suffer a 50% failure rate and still keep doing what you're doing.
Yep.
By planning ahead and putting in the redundancy so you don't have a single point of failure.
That sounds great. Now, I mean, that sounds important.
And with that point, the other thing is, instead of doing a great big production facility like these 1,000-acre, 5,000-acre farms where they put the great big combines and everything out there, okay, you have single points of failure because if your combine goes down, but if you have 200 small producers, then you start entertaining things such as lean agriculture, lean manufacturing, lean construction. In other words, they've found that a bunch of small producers can be overall way more productive than the great big large producer that will suffer a single point of failure.
Yeah.
So that's something else that's built into the OSR. So we have the like-minded individuals and essential resources network. We have the education. We have the organization and the management training. And then the fourth step we have, which has been amazing to see how this come about, is opportunities to serve and help your neighbor without having to build that in there. It's just automatically happened because of the kind of people are. And so we could spend 2 hours talking about all the different things that have happened there. But the bottom line is we're all connected with Starlink and HughesNet and that type of thing. So when somebody's plastic is blowing off of their greenhouse or another issue comes up, they put the word out, and within 5-10 minutes, you got 10-15 people show up.
Yeah, that's great.
So
that's really
having
wonderful.
a community of like-minded people is amazing.
Perfect. I love that. Jesse, I think you would like to come in here and kind of facilitate answering some of the question as well.
Sure. Well, you originally asked earlier about how we picked the land.
Sure.
We originally, if I remember right, before I joined, they had looked for land in, let me think, I believe it was Oregon first, not Oregon, Wyoming first, Idaho, Arizona, and they found some land near Eager, was it, Philip? Near Eager, Arizona. But the family wouldn't negotiate on the price. It was just too much.
Yeah.
And then we ran across this property in Utah. It's been called Riverbed Ranch since the 1800s. It's out in the middle of nowhere. And when we first found it on the map, we were thinking, wow, this is really out there.
Yeah.
And, if you picture a picture of Utah and you point your finger on where you think out in the middle of nowhere is, that's where it is. and And then all this insanity with COVID happened, and then we started wondering, well, we wonder if it's far enough. Anyway, so we ended up getting that property. It had more the water rights alone. Utah obsesses over water rights,
Mm-hmm.
which Arizona doesn't do, thank goodness. And so the water rights in the property in Utah was worth more than the land itself. So
Mm,
we really felt like we got a screaming deal on that property.
sure.
Um, and then we've known all along that we wanted to do 5 of these communities
Okay.
in the western states. And so I kept an eye out on property that was available here in Arizona.
Mhm.
And the property that's now Coslor Cove came up for sale. And I said to Philip and Larry, who's also works with us, what do you guys think about this? And so they drove down and we went and looked at it, and it was
Yeah.
like, wow, this is beautiful land. It was just gorgeous
It's a very nice
property.
area. Again,
Yeah.
I've said that I've been there before, and it's very beautiful and picturesque.
We actually heard from the neighbors. I mean, I don't know if this is true. Maybe it's just a local rumor that the property used to be considered a sacred area for the Hopi people. I don't know.
It I was looking at your aerial footage there, the what you were showing off on your website, and it looks to me like, yes, there is particularly like routes where the Hopi would go to um pray and find areas around, because they're somewhat nomadic. There are areas where outside of our reservation that are sacred sites, and where they would travel and walk and run to for ceremonies and for just prayer. So I don't have
That's
extensive
cool.
knowledge, but it does sound like something that is right up that alley, and
Yeah.
can definitely be uh, researched or found out through historical documents.
So one of our shareholders in so when we found the property,
Yeah,
well, in Utah, we had a whole bunch of shareholders in the co-op before we even found the land.
sure.
In Arizona, we did it the other way around. We found the land and went, wow, we want this land.
Come check it out. Like, let's get
Yeah,
involved.
yeah, yeah. So, and that has some challenges getting the land before you get the people.
Hmm.
So now, and as we're looking to Idaho, we're saying, okay, let's find the people first.
Yeah.
It's going to be a lot easier that way. So, yeah. So that's how we came
Yeah, that's
about with the land.
it's wonderful. I mean, the reason why I was asking is just one part. It shows kind of the core values, especially, and the learning process of developing one of these communities, and how one will indicate unique sites or something of the land that you're really trying to really promote those core values. So, one hand feeds the other, so to speak. So that is something that I was very interested in learning about, just from the perspective of, if you are wanting to become an investor, how that might look, or just kind of the first steps into that. Wanting to be a community member. One of the things you brought up, and I'm kind of intrigued about, and it's particularly to Arizona water and the water rights. One of the things that I learned from your video was that you guys are at a basin where you guys will be able to thrive pretty well as far as uh, starting wells and grabbing water from that element. I wanted to ask you how many are needed for that Arizona site, or how many you expect as far as well sites to have by the end of 2025.
Oh,
The the what we're actually looking at is having somewhere to 200 to 250 wells on it.
Okay.
And so a lot of people think, oh, all these wells, that's a whole bunch of water. Well, you're talking about smaller wells.
Yeah.
Now it's more expensive to do this than to put in the big ones, but you have the redundancy built in.
Hmm.
And the second issue, when you're dealing with 2 to 5 acres on that, you have connecting multiple units to a single well is
Hmm.
very expensive. And so our model is that every homestead will be self-reliant, have its
Okay.
own dirt, its own shelter, its own water, its own sanitation, its own power, which is something else is becomes more feasible to put in a smaller power system that will operate a smaller well and your home
Hmm.
and everything going, but it gives you your redundancy. So if your neighbors goes out, you can help your neighbor.
Yeah.
But if your neighbor is connected to 6 homes, then there's no way to really help them.
Yeah.
So that's something that we make sure people understand right up front. Okay, we're talking about 2 acre self-sustainable setup because of the redundancy that's there. And it's
Sure.
interesting in talking to well drillers and other people, they're saying that's the only way to go because we see so many problems when you have multiple households on a single well and it
Yeah.
goes down and they blame each other. You get the finger pointing
Hmm.
going on and a lot of frustration that creates. And so, for example, I had my well going. My neighbor didn't have his well in yet, and so every 2 weeks I would fill up his 2,500 gallon tank, and he
Hmm.
was able to keep his garden going until he got his well in.
Yeah.
And then I have my 2 other neighbors that are actually family members, and we're connecting all 3 of our wells together. So if one goes down, all we got to
Hmm.
do is turn on a valve, and we keep doing what we're doing.
I love again these stories kind of really show and highlight what you're going to encounter in these communities or just in what you're going to be living through as far as a member of this community, because again you have a perspective or just kind of a purview of like what it takes and what I mean. I'll be honest. I've watched Discovery Channel. They've got the Off the Grid People show, and it looks just as hard to develop your single home by yourself or with the help of friends and family. Um, and that's hard enough. But to even take it even further to sustain yourself, they don't really go into that where it's like you're sustaining yourself for the prolonged period that you're going to be living on the land. So that's another element that I feel like people don't really see that element because it does take months to develop and understand. It's like, okay, we're doing the greenhouse, and that takes months to cultivate and start getting off the ground. On top of like just the barn situation in itself is like another element of just like getting it up and to code. It's another thing altogether. It's like that is another element. And so all of these aspects you've learned through your period of just learning through the process and getting it done from one house to the next and to all these other community members. Now, I'd love to just kind of touch upon the fact that we're talking about off the grid in the sense of alternative energy or energy itself to sustain the people who are living. Maybe Jesse could hop in on this one and just kind of give us a little bit of insight on not only just, I imagine it's solar power, but what even other opportunities as far as energy resources, maybe wind has become an element that you guys have looked into. I don't know as far as because I know our tribe, what they ended up trying to do was bring in the university to do wind studies to see if there was more appropriate land where they could put a wind farm for the community or for the tribe itself. So I don't know what entails for the windmills or the wind turbines, but maybe you can give us just an overall sense of alternative energy and how it works off the grid.
Sure. Yeah. We're really blessed in the Western US because we get so much sunshine out here,
Yes.
which is why it's always brown and not green.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's a water issue, isn't it?
It's
Anyway,
water. It's
so
both. It's both. Trust
yeah.
me.
So we see wind as a supplement to
Mhm.
solar because typically both in our Arizona property and also in Utah, we get on average at least 5 hours of sunshine a day
Mhm.
year round, which
Yeah.
is sufficient to store up enough power to run a household if you're careful with your power usage.
Mhm.
Um, living off a solar system solar power system, you have to be careful about how you can't leave lights on all night. You can't
Yeah,
run your dishwasher at night. You need to time your use of power appropriately.
for sure.
But most of us see wind as an option for a supplement because the wind blows at night, which is would be a great time to have that supplement kick in.
Yeah.
I know there's several of us in the Utah location who want to get to that, but none of us, as far as I know, have put up a windmill yet.
Okay.
And there's some great new technology. In fact, just today on YouTube before the call, I saw a video of people who had taken old satellite or Dish Network dishes and polished them and were boiling water and using the steam to run a power generator
Nice.
to charge their solar batteries. I thought,
Steam
wow, that's
engine
a great
power.
idea. Yeah. So, I might play with that myself. I don't know. We'll see.
I think it's really
Yeah.
fun. I think it's really fun that you still are educating yourself on like different routes
Oh,
of like,
yeah.
really trying to push the envelopes. Like we need other opportunities, and it's not
What's
it's not
Jose?
helpful to us to just rely on one thing.
Yeah, Jose, one thing that we have found in a community of like-minded people like this
Mhm.
is the breadth and depth of knowledge.
Mhm.
For example, I was unaware of I ordered my big solar set and it was sitting in a container and all ready to go. And I thought, man, I don't have time to put this all together because I'm trying to get ready for winter and
Mhm.
everything. And then I saw one of my neighbors took just one of his panels and used some cord and tied it on top of his RV. And then all of a sudden he had light at night and he had his communications going.
Nice.
Whereas I went through like four generators and I go, well, shoot, I can do that. So I took $300 and I just put 9 of my 32 panels up on the side of a storage container. And all of a sudden, my need for gas, my need for generator, all that noise went away.
Yeah.
And so he looked at mine and he says, oh, I can do that. So he put some poles out there and put 24 panels up.
Nice.
And I go, wow. And so generationally, I learn something every day out here.
Wonderful. I find it very, I find it very, just like overall a level of intrigue and beauty behind it, because again, we're talking about building a society based on just learning or educating themselves on the processes and allowing them to either make the mistake themselves because they can feel like, I can make a mistake and feel okay that I can move forward into doing it and attempting it another time with success, or allowing yourself open to saying, I need help from your neighbor, and saying, hey, look, I don't feel confident in what I'm doing on my land. Can you show me or give me insight on how I can make this better or make it successful? So I love that because it just one shows the ability of humans to build culture and build community, but also just allows for the individual themselves to become self-reliant and reliant and just become a very knowledgeable human being.
One of the things we're seeing that is really interesting is that self-reliant people who are willing to live this lifestyle, they tend to be very willing to help their neighbor, which
Yeah,
is interesting.
yeah,
And in our competitive society, it seems like we're all competing against our neighbors.
mhm.
But in this kind of setting, it's been amazing how quickly people will run to help their neighbors. It's really
Absolutely.
quite awesome, actually.
Well, I think you guys have set the tone as far as one, being advocates for your community, but also being advocates for self-reliance and just showing that you can do this and be successful. So we're kind of reaching the end of our conversation here, or end of our time together. what I like to do at the end of our podcast, and really with a lot of the people who come in through our doors, is just to kind of ask, like, ultimately, are there any goals that you guys are shooting for so that our audience may be able to help you in some sort of fashion for 2025 or for the next couple of years? Is there any big goals that you have in your purview, or just overall what our community and our listeners can do to help you and OSR?
I'd be happy to tackle that one. Um, Actually, in every neighborhood, there's this one family that, they're kind of oddballs, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
They have a garden. They probably have chickens. They may be crazy enough to have goats. They may homeschool their kids.
Hmm.
There's that one crazy family. Those are the people we're looking for.
Got it.
So, so if you have those kind of neighbors, send them to our website. Send
I love
them.
it.
Yeah, do that. For Arizona, it's coslorcove.com, Coslor cove.com. And also, our educational nonprofit, the Academy of Self-Reliance, has a homestead training course. I mean, you don't
Beautiful.
have to be involved in Operation Self-Reliance to benefit from that.
Awesome.
So it's at academyosr.com, and you click on the picture that talks about the path to self-reliance.
Yeah.
And there's a whole training course on how you can, and if you actually do the homework assignments, by the time end up with the 24th lesson, you would have a solid plan for building your own off-grid community, whether it's with us, your own off-grid homestead, whether it's with us or
Mhm.
on your own. There are huge advantages to going in a community,
Love it.
and we encourage people to do that, whether it's with us or someone else. But yeah, help us find the people that would benefit from this. That would be awesome.
That's definitely something I think every listener can help you or help that family that you were discussing point them in the right direction. And I just want to say thank you to both of you for doing what you do and educating others and just wanting to help and build these communities and wanting to share what you've learned. And I think one of the things I would like to kind of bring to the table here is what something that your interview, Philip, it was in an article, I think in the White Mountain Independent, that I just want to kind of highlight here. A community of self-reliant families with integrity who understand that choices have consequences and have the resources to build out a small but sustainable homestead brings to the neighborhood a brighter and safer future. And I cannot say that any better than what you just put there in that quote. So thank you for the person that you are, the man that you've become just through this community, and just what you've learned through the process. So thank you, Philip, and thank you, Jesse. And if I can just give you the opportunity again, Jesse, let everyone know phone number, address, social media handle, website, whatever they can do to find you guys online.
Sure. So Coslor Cove, Coslor cove.com. And we have our project summaries available there. You just put your name and email, and if you're on a desktop computer, you can download it immediately. Awesome. If not, I get an email and I'll send you a copy of it.
Awesome.
Explains the whole program and what we're doing. And yeah, that's probably the best thing for people to do is to go download that project summary.
Awesome. Thank you.
Check out the website.
Jose, I would like to leave you with one final thought, and it's part of our mantra, or whatever you want to say, our approach. You've heard, if you give a guy a fish, you feed him for a day. If you teach him how to fish, you feed him for a lifetime.
Yes.
But we believe that if you can teach people how to teach how to fish, you can feed a nation.
I love that. I think that's right where I put my mind towards, and just something that I can take away and really think about on the long term and the long scope of life and in general. So I just, again, I think what you both bring to the table and what you both have as far as your personal core values is wonderful. I encourage you guys to continue to share what you have to share with others. And I think both communities and your goal for all 5 different communities, I think will definitely be successful, and you guys will continue to build these and affect a lot of lives and affect a lot of families. So kudos to you. We do have an outro for ourselves. You can hear every episode of our podcast at findingarizonapodcast.com. Social media wise, to connect with us, Finding Arizona Podcast under everything. And we end every conversation with a kisses, hugs, and belly rubs to our 4-legged friends. And we will see you all next time.